Hello, Val.
Hello.
Hello again.
Hello again. Here we go.
Yeah.
Take two.
Take two. We just recorded a huge chunk, which then got lost somewhere in the ether. So we're having to roll with it.
Mm-hmm. It's really not to force the spirituality of it, but it really is like meditating, when you have to like get good at returning, like starting over, going back.
That's right. That's right. And also the chaos, that comes with it, and holding space for the chaos.
Yes. Yeah. And just letting it go.
Exactly. And, which is kind of what we were talking about too, because we were talking about motherhood and having to hold all the different pieces. And our children are at school together, Nico and your daughter Lila.
Yeah.
They're very cute. They look like twins.
They do.
We've been told many times.
Yes. It's so interesting because I would say, I mean, between you and Eric and me and Pete, there's not much similarities in looks, but our children look exactly the same. And this part is the same. They get along as well as we do. It all feels like we've all known each other before.
Oh, yes, they do. Yeah, there's a familiarity there for sure. Yeah.
It's really sweet.
And I really wanted to get you on today because, as mothers, we see each other a lot about town. We live in a small town, and so we have this beautiful community here, and we have it's a real privilege to be able to see each other lots, and we're always at the park together or doing fun activities, and so we have these huge conversations typically around motherhood. And so I thought, well, why not record one of them? Especially because what we have in common, I think, is this tending towards like the mystical aspect of things and the spiritual aspects of things, whilst also believing in embodiment and just being very real about things.
Yeah, that's right.
And I know that you're a dancer too.
Yeah. I mean, it's been quite a journey to incorporate, and incorporate even feels like too small of a word. I was going to say incorporate the body into my spiritual practice, but really it's like the portal. My body is the portal to my spiritual practice. And dancing is, probably the number one tool to access that for me. Even though the dancing that I do, if you see it on my Instagram or go to one of my dance classes, is just, it's just like cardio, hip hop, fun.
But it's so great though. I mean, as I was saying before, before we got on, and it just always makes me so happy to watch you. It just seems so real, and just so authentic. And it's really unlike a lot of things that I see out there, at the moment. Yeah. And really yesterday I was sharing that I had like such a shitty day. Really, I was just having one of those like day where I was just wanting to curl up in a blanket and, fall asleep. And I thought, well, I have the interview with Val tomorrow. Let me go and see her IG page. And then I was looking through your dance videos that I know. And then I came across your video with the bangs whilst you're trying to cut your bangs, or you are cutting your own bangs.
Yeah, I cut them for real.
You did. You went through with it.
Yeah.
And it just completely changed my day. It was just so beautiful. Like you went through all the range of human emotions. It was so authentic. You were laughing and then you were crying.
Oh, yeah.
And it just really cheered me up, because I think like we can get so serious on this mystical path. And I know like definitely for me, it's very often that I have this kind of like mystical, serious persona, online, but the reality is completely different. Like I'm so like weird and goofy and not, I don't know, maybe people think I'm intense anyway, but I'm kind of like, that's not necessarily what I want for my everyday life, and I think you and your husband Pete, who's a comedian, and you both have a podcast together, and you're just so real, and just through comedy and real talk and spirituality mixed in together, you're really holding the sacred and the profane together. And I think that especially in these new age circles, or like wellness circles nowadays, that I think have been so co-opted and hijacked. I think that it's really important that we come back to something more authentic.
Yeah, thank you for that. It's an interesting thing to hold both, because it's a practice in knowing that it's not gonna be for everyone, like our podcast, shameless plug, You Made It Weird, is the podcast that I do.
Yep.
Our episodes are called We Made It Weird. And we laugh about, like, sometimes, the women in my meditation, training, my small group for my meditation teacher training, for example, will be like, I listened to the podcast, and then I like have this flare up of panic where I'm like, oh my God, we could have talked about like diarrhea. We could have been talking about any inappropriate thing, because it's just all over the map. It's like, it's our whole full unfiltered selves. And then sometimes I'll recommend it to just like a friend who isn't really in the spiritual world, or I won't even recommend it. I'll just tell them about it and they'll want to listen. And then I'm like, oh boy, like we just got into the depths of non-dualism. Like, are they going to be interested in that?
Right.
And, but the thing is that it's such a good practice, specifically for us, because he and I were both raised in evangelical Christianity. And we both sort of experienced this, but I especially, my parents were evangelical pastors. So it was very much like, I was a pastor's kid. It was very like political. It's like being a political figure's daughter. And so I learned really early on that, the most important thing is sort of the image that we're putting forth, and that we are, as a family, being put on this pedestal, and it's very important to be good examples and to represent things. And so I was raised in the pure, like, to show your purity. That's be the shining star of purity. And so to now have a podcast where thousands and thousands of people hear the profane, is really remedying that. And to have people reach out who listen to it, and it resonates with them, and it makes them feel not alone. I think that's the real gift, is it's actually loving, even when you're talking about ridiculous human things. It's a way to connect, which is loving. So
it's so beautiful. Yeah, because we can also feel so lonely on our spiritual path. And there is such a tendency in spirituality to have closed groups or cliques, or make the other person different. And of course, that's so different to, non-dualism, but also the idea of alchemy is really based on bringing everything together.
Yeah.
All of life is alchemy.
That's so true. Yes. And it is, I think, whatever you're doing, if you're showing the humanity in it, so in our podcast and just in our lives, we're trying to be fully in this human experience. And So what is it like to be a spiritual being fully in a human experience, and that means sometimes we struggle and we say the wrong thing, or we just totally fail at it. And all of that is valuable. All of that is part of it. No part gets left out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I resonate with that because part of the feminine path as well is also just bringing that heaven down to earth and really finding that divinity within our human
Mhm.
bodies,
Yeah.
experiencing that full range. Yeah.
Oh, it's just exactly the way of the feminine mystic is the exact tone that resonates with my body and heart. and
Mm.
and I came to it fairly recently, um through Mirabai Starr's book Wild Mercy, and
Yeah.
she's now a very dear friend. um and I couldn't, it was like jaw on the floor when I read it, and this thing was being articulated that I had always felt, but really was, certainly not brought up in my evangelical Christianity. It was very opposite. It was not trusting the body, not trusting yourself, living for a heaven, transcending this world.
Yeah.
This world is a mistake. Like all of these sorts of teachings, that ultimately did not resonate. Like I think I really believed them, but there was a dissonance for sure. And then, to give it credit, the one thing that is sort of resonant with the feminine mystic that I got from my upbringing was the relationship element of it.
Mm.
I happened to be in a church that was very much about community, about reaching out to people, about building relationships. And that is certainly the way of the feminine mystic, is that we merge with the beloved through each other.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. Yes, beautiful, that sense of
mm,
union.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So that has been the through line that feels, you know, just so correct. And it really is. And it goes back to silliness and fun. It's like when my girlfriends come to my dance class, or we all go to somebody else's dance class, and we're just shaking our booties and we're laughing and making each other laugh. It feels like the definition of holy to me. It feels
Yes.
like it feels like church. It really does.
Oh, because it's so beautiful because there's real connection there. That's the thing. There's life force energy moving and
Yeah.
connection, and there's that gift of energy which the feminine brings.
Yeah, that's right. And it's connection with each other. It's connection with the earth. Your feet are on the ground, and you're moving to like a rhythm. And then it's also connection with your body. It's like full alignment.
Yeah.
And yeah, my spirit thrives in that kind of environment.
Yes. And now you've also been moving towards gardening. We were talking about how, like, we now, so that, as mothers and our children are a little bit older, suddenly the gardening thing has come up.
Yeah,
It's
yes.
going to be a thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. My journey with gardening has been so such a perfect metaphor, as gardening is. That's the gift of it, is that gardening is a perfect metaphor for life in a million different ways. Just like the ocean, you're
Yeah.
just like, it's so cliche, but I could write, 10 poems about how gardening is like life.
Right.
Um, but yeah, my journey with gardening has been too. It's like I find myself drawn to it in specific seasons of my life. And yeah, we now our kids are old enough and where they can even help.
Right.
And just I've always found the process of like breaking ground, like literally starting, picking up a spade and taking the first swipe at the neglected earth
Yeah.
and
Turning
breaking
the
up.
soil.
yes, churning it, pulling out like deeply rooted things that have been, destructive, but have been life. I mean, it is life, those weeds. So it's
Yeah.
like there's like a respect to it, but there's also like, all right, time for you to come out and be removed. And it just feels so good to pull all of that out and to loosen the earth and get it ready, prepare it for new life. And yeah, that's the unexpected gift of gardening. You always think like the planting and the tending and the harvesting is,
Yes.
but that those first steps of uprooting
Yeah.
feel
That's
really,
really
really
good for your mental health. That's really just like,
yeah.
yeah, therapy right there. Yeah.
Yeah, it's such a clear external experience for, the uncomfortable things that we do to heal and to to tend
Mm.
to our inner gardens.
Yeah. And it sounds like you've been through a real journey since you left your community then.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
yeah, so
Yeah.
it's been quite a few years now, and yeah, that must have been a journey coming out into the
Yeah.
world and yeah,
Oh,
rediscovering
absolutely.
things.
Yeah, and it's like the hero's journey circle too of leaving, when I first left, it wasn't this grand gesture of like, I quit and like slam the door. It was pretty subtle. But it was, just starting to notice certain things that weren't resonating. And my parents moved away. I think that was sort of the catalyst for it, which is funny to use that word because that was the church that I started going to after my parents stopped pastoring their church and moved away. Then I started to go to a church called Catalyst.
Oh, I
And
see.
yeah, and that was like where a lot of my deconstructing sort of started to take place. And this was like I was 22. Um,
Mhm.
and so for a while, few years, I sort of was over thinking about spirituality. I was like, this has taken such a big seat in my life for so long that I just want to like drop it and have
Yeah.
fun.
I
Like it
get I
would,
get that. Yeah, no, I know exactly how you feel. Kind of feel like I'm going through that now at the moment.
yeah, I have waves of it for sure, and I think that that's appropriate. Like you said, it can get so serious and so like feel like this constant, always a work in progress and always and I think part of that is rest
Yeah.
and remembering fun. And our friend Genevieve said to me once, she's like, the purpose of life isn't just to heal and improve. It's like we also are here to enjoy and savor. And so
Yeah.
yeah, so I took a good, several year break where I was sort of just like, nah, I'm not really interested in thinking about it one way or another.
Right. Yeah.
And and in that time, that's when I discovered so many things about myself because I was detangling from the church. I figured out that I love dancing, that I love singing, that I love circles of women, that female friendship is significant to my well-being. All these things that seemed to not have anything to do with my spirituality.
Yeah.
And then as I started to well, really what happened was I got thrown in, as we often do when we're, when we're not wanting to look at things. And I had a psychedelic trip that where a lot of childhood trauma came up. I didn't know that that's what was happening. I thought I was just actually losing my mind.
Oh.
And in the subsequent weeks and months, even just thought that I had broken my brain.
Oh.
And that also happened to be the day that I did that psychedelic trip was the day that I conceived Leela. And I didn't know that either, obviously. So,
Oh, sweet Leela. Now we know.
now we know. I
Leela is
mean,
all the colors.
that's exactly
All
right.
the
I mean,
colors.
we
Rainbow.
named her Leela, which is, the dance of life, the play of life.
Right.
And that's exactly who she has been from the second she was conceived was,
Oh,
was here is life fully 100% turned up. No
right.
filters, no barriers. And yeah, and so I while I was pregnant was processing a lot of, not even really processing the trauma yet, just sort of trying to regulate. Um
Wow.
and Pete, my husband, had already been into Ram Dass, and we had been to Ram Dass retreats, and I loved that community. But again, I was just sort of in it for the friendships. I wasn't really interested in the spiritual path. But because I was so desperate, I was started meditating and just doing really basic mindfulness work. And I think what was happening amongst all the other things was that I was, for the first time, entering my body for the first
Wow.
time since being 7, probably. I was fully re-entering my body.
My goodness.
And
That's through meditation practice. Like
yes, and
around this track.
pregnancy. I mean, pregnancy, was sort of what launched that. But yeah, it was just basic mindfulness, which is, focusing on an anchor, your breath or your body, and then like allowing those feelings to come up and dance around and move out, and then come up and dance around and move out. And it was so simple, but it was everything. It was reacquainting me with myself. um and with like a spiritual path. So after that, it really was, and then finding a therapist and doing a lot of somatic trauma healing.
Right.
I really got to know the gifts of embodiment and of everything that our bodies hold and process and do for us, and really fell in love with this human body that I have.
Yeah.
And then had a little bit of a difficult time reconciling that with the spiritual teachings that I was learning,
Yeah.
sort of um, non-dual oneness, like identifying as pure awareness, all these things that I do ultimately subscribe to, but not for the sake of transcending out of this human experience, for
Absolutely.
being more fully in this body, in this human experience.
Yeah.
And I just didn't know how to reconcile that until I read Wild Mercy and learned about the way of the feminine mystic.
Yeah. The
And
wonderful Mirabai.
yeah,
Yeah. That's beautiful that you say that, because I think when we first had our, first tea together or something, I just remember coming to you and being like, I just feel so terrible. Like, it's so incredible, you like sort of feeling that I had somehow failed on my spiritual path, because I still felt so awful, or because I had so much PTSD still.
yeah, yeah,
And that was I was just about, or had I just been to the Amen clinic, and
yeah.
they discovered all this PTSD, and even they were confused about, like, how can you be a meditator but still have all this stuff going on? Like, well, because they don't preclude each other. I
No,
mean, just because you meditate a lot, which, by the way,
yeah,
meditation can be escapism for a lot of people anyway, but just because you meditate a lot, it doesn't, you still have to go through that feminine path of surrender and somatics and working through the trauma in the body.
yes, yes, absolutely. Yeah, and it is so, it's also why people can go to talk therapy for years and years, and feel like they are stuck, that they're not getting any better,
Yeah.
because it's our brains taking over and cutting off our bodies. And the body has its own rhythm, its own path. And the brain really is, in my experience, our thinking minds really are just better servants to
Yeah.
our body. They're at their best when they're decoding what's happening with the body and in communication with it. But yeah, the trauma is, I think I'm interested in healing trauma as a spiritual path, as opposed to using a spiritual path to bypass trauma, to transcend trauma even. I think that results in a lot of exactly what you're feeling. And I've experienced it too. And I've seen my husband experience it, this sort of shame around, like, how am I still here after all of the spiritual practices that I have and all the knowledge that I collect? And Tara Brach is another one of my great teachers, and she talks about how in Buddhism they call it the second arrow, but it's the first arrow is the feeling, and the second arrow is the shame around the feeling.
Oh, wow.
And we all experience that in different ways, but a lot of times when we're in a spiritual community or on a spiritual path, that's the way that manifests is, well, shouldn't I be too spiritual to have this trauma? When really it's such a profound portal. I mean,
Yes.
it's a gift in the way that all suffering and all experience can be a gift. And like you said, it's an invitation to alchemize.
Yes. And then to be really deeper in presence and deeper in the body. I teach you to say there's nothing like grief to put you into your body,
Yes.
Pain, you have to just be with it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And the feeling, I'm certain you've experienced it too, when we stop running and we just turn and face it and hold the pain and sit and be with it and cradle it, and even get to a place where we can love it, or like in the tantric practice, really fully merge with it. The freedom and the joy and the peace and the like capital L love that occurs when we're there is deeper than any sort of joy that can come from not incorporating that.
Right.
It's swirled in there, the grief, the trauma, the pain, the weight of existence, when it's included in the love and the light and the joy of being a person. That's it. Like, that's the creme de la creme.
Yes, the fullness of that. It's so true, the fullness. And that's where I think you really get to feel your womb and your heart. And there's a yumminess there. Yeah, and we can't be split off from any part of ourselves.
No, yeah, all parts included. And this is the hardest practice, and I fail at it every single day.
Oh, yeah.
Every day.
That too. Yeah, no, absolutely. It is the practice.
Yeah. And even the failing part is included. It gets in there too. And that's going back to motherhood, that's the real gift of these beings that come into our lives. And Leela, I think, like all children, but since she's the one that I have the experience mothering, I'll say she is fully alive. I mean, there is just nothing muted or repressed or suppressed about her experience. I was laughing with your husband, actually, Eric, about how we were trained to fawn, you know, as kids. There's fight, flight, freeze, and then there's fawn. And fawn is
Mm.
endearing yourself to the threat in order
Yeah.
to survive. And so I just really learned how to quickly endear myself to anyone so that I could be safe. And often it was at the expense of my own body, my own needs, my own desires.
Yeah.
Um, and you know, I joked, but it's very serious. I was like, I think that's like 80% of my personality. Like I feel really very much at the beginning of the journey of detangling that. And I look at Leela and she has zero fun. They're just, she has no instinct to put aside her own feelings for the sake of anyone else.
Yeah, which is so beautiful because you don't want them to override and you their own bodies and feelings. And of
Yeah.
course, you don't want them to please, you know, to become little people pleasers or
Yes.
yeah,
And it's so challenging too. It's like, it's exactly, she's doing exactly what I would want for her to do. Oh, did you lose me?
I
Let's get you
you're
first.
back, you're back.
Yeah. She's doing exactly what I would want.
Yeah.
And it's so challenging because I was trained to fawn. And she sometimes, I make the mistake of viewing her as an extension of myself
Mm.
or some sort of report card of my parenting. And then she is a wild animal.
Right. And
And
so you're holding it and having to sort of process your own shame around those moments or be worried
exactly.
about what other people think.
That's right. And when I'm not, you know, when I'm not resourced and I'm reacting, I'm trying to get her to behave the way that I was trained to
Yeah.
behave for her own, you know, it's this biological need for her to survive. I'm placing the survival tactics that I learned on her, and but she doesn't need it. It's like I just described it to Pete this way. It's like I went through this very specific forest and gathered all of these tools that I need to like cut down these very specific trees. And I'm out of the forest, and not only am I still carrying these tools,
Mm.
but now I'm like trying to place this heavy backpack on my daughter in those moments, and she lives at the beach, you know. She doesn't need she doesn't need an axe.
Totally.
She's got
She's
it.
like, what
It's
are you
okay.
doing with all this stuff?
Yeah, why are you
I
putting
don't
all of
need
this
it.
in my backpack? I don't need this.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's really, really, this is why motherhood as a spiritual practice as well, trauma as a spiritual practice and
Yeah.
motherhood as a spiritual practice is just the richest territory, because in ordinary daily activities you'll be faced with your specific, like a customized
Yeah.
lesson
Absolutely.
for
Absolutely.
you.
For me, it's been like overwhelm. I get very easily overwhelmed, also
Yes.
because of my upbringing. And
Yeah.
so I go into this sort of functional freeze mode.
Yeah.
And I would notice it, you know, in those in certain moments. Maybe when he was a bit younger, because we'd have these long stretches of time, which somehow made me feel more overwhelmed, you know.
Oh, yeah.
Now that he's interacting more, for some reason,
Mhm.
I find it easier,
Yeah.
more flowing. But when he was less verbal, I suppose, and
Right.
we'd have these long stretches of time, I would feel this overwhelm come up. And I still feel it when I'm around like lots of people, which I have to be now as a mother. Like we don't have the luxury as an
Mhm.
introvert. I don't have the luxury of just like pottering around at home all afternoon. So
Yeah.
I have
Mhm.
to be out, which is beautiful.
Yes.
But also I'm having to manage my overwhelm a lot of the time.
Yes. Overwhelm is such a good word for it and so relatable. And that's both me and Pete, my husband, are very easily overwhelmed. And so is Leela. So it's like three highly, highly sensitive people. We're not just
Yes.
HSPs, we're HHSPs. And we're all just sort of triggering each other and getting deeply
Yeah.
overwhelmed and then sort of coming back together and being like, sorry, I was overwhelmed.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's three like nervous systems. And
Yeah.
yes, I find myself also saying, feeling, I'm sorry, I let my emotions get the better of me, or,
Yeah.
'cause like, or even like, I watch for that place where I go cold,
Yeah.
rather, which also, because that's one of my pet peeves, because that's how I grew up without
Mm.
necessarily having a lot of attunement.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
when in those moments where I kind of like really withdraw and step back within myself and then I go cold, I really have to check in with myself in those moments.
Oh, yeah. I just had like one of those, it was a small, uh, it felt like a failure at the time. But I just, because I wasn't in control. So it wasn't even necessarily the act, but it was like I was doing that out of anger. And it was yesterday. I was carrying really heavy things. We bought a tent and a sleeping bag yesterday, and I was carrying them to the car, and Leela was stopping at every single stick and rock and piece of garbage that she sees on the sidewalk. And
Yep.
I was like, Leela, we gotta go, we gotta go. And then she saw something in the window that of a store that she wanted, and sat down and started to like throw a fit about it. And I instantly, this is definitely one of my triggers, because I was just not allowed. I was not allowed to throw any sort of fit, which means I wasn't allowed to have any big feelings that were inconvenient to my
Wow.
family. But certainly about like wanting items, because we just
Yeah.
didn't have a lot of money. That's not our family circumstance now. So I'm so afraid that she's going to become like this additional idea of like spoiled, or entitled, or so I'm holding this tent and the sleeping bag that I bought because she wants to go camping in our backyard, and we're going to do it. And then she's crying because she wants a stuffy in the window. And I just go instantly 0 to 100 telling these stories of like, she's spoiled. We did it. We did, whatever. She's never going to be satisfied in life
Yeah.
because of us. And so she's sitting on the curb, and I say, like, I literally said, I'm like, I'm ashamed to tell you that I said, your want monster has gotten the better of you and it needs to get a grip. And I started to just walk away, like walking, like I'm going to the car. And that's like that one, even more than get a grip, which
Which
is
I actually think it was kind of cute the way you said that. Because again, like being real is important sometimes.
yeah, I know. And she doesn't even know the term get a grip. I mean, I'm sure she
Get a
can use
grip to
context
your
clues.
5-year-old.
But she is seeing me walk away. And like that's the part that broke my heart, was that
Yeah.
like I was walking away in anger, and I was not looking back. I wasn't going to leave her, obviously, but like, she might not know that. And then she's like, Mama. And then I had to say, like, I'm really sorry. I don't want to walk away from you in those moments. I want to connect with you. But
No.
it was overwhelming for me. And that is the trick, is like, again and again failing and repairing at
Right.
the
Because
same
the
time.
repair is so important.
Yeah.
And she
Yeah.
needs to know that that repair is available. And that's also a part of
Mm.
alchemy and understanding the world.
Yeah.
But sometimes that repair is even more powerful than if you were not authentic and you had to be the perfect mom like all the time and then have feelings bubble up
Yes.
inside, which they can read anyway because they can read everything.
Yes. Their little
Everything,
energy
especially
pad.
Lila's a little reflector.
She is. Yes. She's a reflector in human design. So she really, there's nothing, no hiding from her. And
Yeah,
she's not hiding anything else,
yeah,
so
that's true.
So that is it. That's exactly right. It's thank God there's so much value in the repair, because yeah, if we were even able to stay perfectly composed as parents, then when she's not able to stay composed, she would feel like something was deeply wrong with her, because she has no example of how human beings can get frustrated and overwhelmed and make mistakes. And you can always, it's like starting this podcast over. It's like starting over in meditation. It's like you can always return back.
Yeah.
And this is another quote from Tara Brach, my teacher. She talks about this in meditation, but she says, every time you wander and return back to the breath or your anchor, you're carving the pathway home. So it's a valuable to lose your way and then come back, because the pathway is becoming even more ingrained
Wow.
and deeper, you know. So
That's so beautiful.
yeah, so it is just remembering that these through lines and everything in parenting, like gardening, you know, like meditation, is a perfect metaphor for all of it.
Right. It's like everything all at once. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And Leela really does, you know, going back to the customized lesson, I would say I am in general, I'm a very emotional person. I'm a Pisces and a projector and all the emotional
Yeah.
things. Um, and so I think in general, I'm pretty aware of my emotions, but my anger is the hard one for me. I can't really get in touch with my anger. I can't green light my own anger. And Leela came bursting in. I swear, even when she was in the womb, I felt like this
Wow.
is like a fire. This is like a fire. And I was expecting like a cool pond of a child.
I love that. I can really relate to Leela, I have to say,
Yeah.
because I felt
Thank
like I
you.
came in like Leela, and I
Mm,
was very much sort of subdued and you're sort of like squashed. I mean, I was a lot for the
mhm,
adults in my life, and I
mhm,
came in as a manifester, and we have
mhm.
issues with anger anyway, and I can vouch for that,
Yeah.
and I'm like all fire, and
Yeah.
I think that was just completely squelched,
Yeah.
and then I've had to learn to bring it back up. But my issues have always been around fire, too much of it, too little, regulating it.
Yeah.
So I love Leela, and I just, welcome, all
Mm,
of her. And I know
mm,
you guys are the perfect parents
mm.
and and, to allow her to be who she is. Yeah.
Thank you for saying that. It is interesting because I see that similarity between you and her, and I tend to be drawn to female friends who are fire, who have that fire energy,
Oh, no.
and I sort of always have, and so it really is also a way in to have love for all of her. Is
Yeah.
that like I actually, the adults that I know that are fiery, I'm obsessed with, you know, I love that. So, you know, when I'm projecting my own stories of what was told to me of how to behave, it's a nice touchstone for me to think of all the fiery women that I know and to be like, this is cool. Like, I don't want to squelch this. And
Oh,
learned a lot of this from Dr. Becky Kennedy, is, you know, our guru. and, and she has a workshop on deeply feeling kids, which Leela
really?
definitely is.
Yeah.
And so much of the practice of parenting these kids is um, really sort of making yourself big enough to hold their big emotions so that they don't feel like they're too much.
Yeah.
Exactly how you described your childhood. It's like they inherently deeply feeling kids and people, which I definitely was, you probably were,
Yeah.
you know, it's we just naturally assume that we're too much. The feeling feels so big that it feels like it's not only overtaking us, but that our fear is that it's going to overtake and overwhelm everyone around us. So a sign of a deeply feeling kid is that they push you away when they need you the most. But they're doing that to like protect you. They're like feeling completely possessed, and they're worried that it's going to possess you. So we just had like the biggest meltdown of the century recently, where Leela was in her room throwing objects, and we started outside the door because she had blocked the door and wouldn't let us in, and was saying, go away, and then even like begging in this like tender way, like, please, I'll do anything if you go away, please go away. And I had to really like, I imagined, and this feels very aligned with you, and my friend Genevieve taught me this, like rooting through my womb, like rooting down into the earth through my womb to stay grounded. And I just said, I hear that you want me to go away. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not afraid of your big feelings. I love you. I'm here. I'm staying right here. I'm not afraid. Like I had to just keep saying,
Wow.
I'm not going anywhere because I love you and I'm not afraid of this. And like, and it was so intense. And finally I got in, like I burst in. I mean, it was like, is this right? I hope this is right. But I just couldn't. I was like, I know, I trust. And this is another thing Dr. Becky Kennedy says is, with deeply feeling kids, when they're in having their big feelings like that, everything you do is going to feel wrong. So
Yeah.
I just like took solace in that. I was like, all right, this feels really wrong, but I'm going to barge in and I'm going to give her physical space, but I'm going to show her that I'm not leaving her, that this is not too much for me. And, yeah. And it feels like in those moments, I'm talking to my own anger, and my own anger is challenging me. And I have to say like, no, I'm not afraid of you. And it is,
Wow. That is an incredible practice. And I think you just healed me just from hearing this, because I had flashbacks of being in Leela's position as a child. It's one of my earliest memories, you know, and shutting that door and shutting everyone out and screaming and just wanting so much for someone to hold me or to show up the way you did. And that is just so incredible that you did that.
oh,
So she's very, very lucky.
thank you for
Yeah.
doing that.
Mhm.
Of
Yeah.
course, it is, you know, it is a constant practice. And there have been plenty of times where I wasn't able to do it, but
Right. Because yeah, I mean, again, it's easy. I mean, like to everything goes out the window. I mean, you know, we practice in our community a lot of this earth meditation and womb meditation, but it's, you know, really rooting down into the earth and running red earth energy. But you know, in a moment where everything is being stirred, sometimes it's easy to forget.
yeah.
Your practice flies out the window.
Yeah, 100%. It happened at your house when we came to visit, and we were leaving and we brought you those cookies, and Leela started having a full meltdown because she wanted one of the cookies that we brought you.
Of course.
And I'm just like, oh my gosh, this is humiliating. And I'm like, Leela, let's just get your shoes on. Let's go.
And of course, I was absolutely fine with it. I was, please take all of them. But it is such of your like internal process. I totally get that.
Yeah, totally. And I said in the car ride there, I was like, you know, Leela, we brought those cookies for Carlotta and Nico, and I don't think Carlotta even had one. And she was just like, oh, really? I thought she had one. Like by then she was like, so, like, are you still thinking about that? Like, you're right. I need to let this go.
Yeah. It's like, come on. Everyone else is over it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think there are little teachers, aren't they? And I definitely have so much. I'm being taught so much by Nico too. And for us, it's like I have a lot of the masculine in my life. You know, these two beautiful masculines have a very open and feminine heart. which is a huge blessing. And I really hope that Nico has, some of that, Eric's open heart, which he does
He does.
completely. He's
Yeah.
had that model to him.
Yeah.
And then the other aspect of that is that Nico is very emotional. He also just does not mind telling you exactly how he feels. Sometimes I can find myself thinking like, is this too much, or is this too much for is he expressing too much of his feminine energy in this moment rather than, of course, he's too young. They haven't even gotten to that place yet where they're still sort of, figuring all of that out in a way. But sometimes just that instinct in me is like, is this too much? Because that's my fear always, like, of the overwhelm and the too much. So is this too much? But from that place of like, should he be expressing his feelings a little bit less now? More contained, be more masculine about his feelings. And obviously we need to move away from all of those labels. And even when I find myself saying things like, that it's so lovely that he's is so feminine. That is also a way of like, why should we even be thinking that about men anymore? You know what I mean? Like, why would we even give it that label?
Right. Absolutely.
Check myself with that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good point. That's so interesting because I think I still think of it that way, but really that is sort of like the patriarchy's idea of what men and the masculine is this very like pretty one-dimensional, emotionally speaking. It's like you're allowed anger and that's it. And but like the feminine doesn't have the monopoly on tears, like the masculine has that too. That is
exactly.
It's very, very cool how I feel like this generation, even Gen Z, but certainly our kids' generation, like all of that is going to start really changing and becoming so much more fluid, even in how they think of themselves, even with where, even if they are subscribing to a male or female thing, it's more about the spiritual connection to the masculine and the feminine. And
right, absolutely, yes, everything is becoming more fluid. Doing away with the old ways, which is lovely to see.
Absolutely. Yeah, I can't even imagine how these kids are going to be as adults. It's going to be so interesting, I'm sure. I mean, it's a brand new world. So
it is. And I think that we've also come a long way from like where our parents were. I mean, certainly there's, as every generation should, it's like it's good that we're sort of always moving forward. So, in my parents' day, there was no such thing as conscious communication or like asking your children how they were. Or, I come from a very strict European background. And so it was a whole new way. And it was a whole different way. And now that we're being so conscious with our communication, who in this, especially in this small town, I feel like really it's going to be different when we move back to Italy. But sometimes I do like that a bit of balance there too, because I think, I don't know, instinctively, I think sometimes we can go a little bit too far with everything being like so conscious.
Yes.
And again, like there's no space for that authentic moment of like actually saying a no, or, being more firm about certain things.
Yeah, totally. I know Leela, we always say like she loves to mess with us. Like if we have sunglasses or a hat on, she's taking them, she's throwing them. She's like, and like you get to a certain point where you're just like, stop messing with me. And I remember telling my therapist once that like I lost it, on Leela, and I felt so bad. And she was like, no, she probably needs to learn that makes people frustrated and annoyed with her, and you're like, right, I guess this is a human being with relationships. And like a lot of it is teaching them how we are in relationship with other people and community. So yeah, of course, everything is balance. It just always comes comes back to that. And it is that what you were saying about the conscious communication kind of reminds me, or feels like the same thing as what we were talking about in the beginning with spirituality being so sometimes feeling like you have to be so serious and perfect, and it's all, on the spiritual path, and it's these human foibles are perfect as they are, they have a place, they have a seat at the table.
And it's lovely. Yeah, we came right full circle. Exactly. Yeah. Just being our most authentic selves and full spectrum of being human. Since we chose this experience to be here anyway, and Earth is Earth School.
Yeah, that's right. I know. I always say we're here, we might as well do the thing,
Right.
Like, let's just do it. And it is just inherently, the human experience is it's heartbreaking, and it's hilarious, and it's, and it's mundane, and it's also wild, and it's, it's so many things all in one, human analog body.
And we really need to learn to live and laugh, and also maybe make this the new spiritual way, something that is more free.
I think there's plenty of grist for the mill, as Ram Dass would say. Just here, just in motherhood, in friendships, in dancing, in laughing, in cutting your bangs, and posting it on Instagram.
Right. And at the end of the day, it's really all about connection. And also, these are the things that are most connectable.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, I know. That's my favorite thing, is when you just share something that's so, it's honestly, it's funny. One of the ways that like social media and Instagram can really sort of serve a greater cause. Obviously, there's a lot that's insidious and not great about it, but I love when there's like a meme that's just sort of going around that everybody has seen, that everybody loves. And it's like this weird way that we go like, we're kind of the same, right? Like, I know we're all living these different lives, and sometimes it can feel like we're so different, but we all think that this like cat, skiing or whatever it is funny, and that's like so precious. It's like this moment where, over the silliest, most human thing, our souls are recognizing that we're connected. It's just really, it's lovely.
It's so nourishing. Oh, thank you so much. Well, so how can people connect to you, other than I suggest everyone follow Val on Instagram, because it's really worth it?
Yes, we honestly have some tearful haircutting.
And the beautiful energy that you exude.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, so on Instagram it's Valerie and Chaney. And our podcast is You Made It Weird with Pete Holmes. On Wednesdays, he interviews a guest, but on Fridays, we have our episodes, which is We Made It Weird. And we have like almost 200 now. I mean, we're really climbing up there. So,
and as you were saying, it's also lovely for your friends to tune in, because it's like we get to catch up on everything that's going on in your world.
Yeah, I really love, I wish all of my friends had their own podcast.
Right.
It's a great way to catch up.
I love that. Oh,
well, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I'm so I can't wait to put this out there, and to spread a little bit of joy.
Spread that joy.
Spread a little bit of joy. All right. Thank you, my love, so much. And I'll see you soon, probably at pickup.
In a couple hours.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.